Harley-Davidson is in big trouble, and for the first time in decades, Indian is right there with them. That's not a headline grab, it's what's showing up on dealership floors right now. New touring bikes sitting longer than they should, financing costs way higher than just a few years ago, and riders quietly choosing to hold on to what they already own. When both American touring giants slow down at the same time, it affects resale value, parts support, and the future of long-haul riding itself. Stay with me till the end, because what this means for riders matters more than most people realize. Two American icons losing ground at the same time. Across the country, riders who have spent decades around American V-twins are noticing something they have never seen before. Two brands that define the open road are showing the same kind of hesitation at the same time, and the pattern is too consistent to ignore. Dealership floors that once cycled through machines every few weeks now hold familiar shapes a little too long, and conversations inside service bays feel heavier than they used to. When two long-trusted names begin to lose momentum together, the air changes. It feels like watching smoke slip out of a barn roof when you cannot yet see the fire. You know something is off, even if the cause has not surfaced. The tension comes from how unusual this moment is. Harley-Davidson and Indian have never moved in lockstep. Their histories were built in rivalry, not synchronization. When one stumbled, the other usually surged. When one brand hit a dry spell, the other found a fresh audience. That natural balance kept the American touring world stable for generations, because riders always had one steady anchor. Today, that anchor feels loose on both sides, and older riders who follow the industry closely can feel the shift without needing anyone to spell it out. Something is changing, and the road ahead does not look familiar, and the first sign of that change arrived the moment Indian's ownership shifted hands. Indian sold to a company that doesn't build machines. Indian's sale landed like a cold wind across the riding community, not because the brand changed hands, but because of who caught it. The buyer is a private group known for moving money, not metal. And that difference carries weight for anyone who has ever turned a wrench. When a company without a manufacturing pulse takes control of a machine-building legacy, riders pay attention. They know the feel of a steady hand on a brand's backbone. And they also know what happens when that hand is missing. A motorcycle line is not a spreadsheet. It is a craft, a discipline, and a rhythm of decisions shaped by people who understand heat cycles, castings, tolerances, and the pride that follows a finished engine out the factory door. That is why this shift matters so much. The new owners may excel at buying and selling assets, but building dependable machines requires a different instinct. Riders, who have watched American brands rise and fall, recognize the pattern. When leadership understands machines, the bikes improve. When leadership understands only numbers, the bikes drift. And once a brand begins drifting, momentum is hard to reclaim. The consequence is simple, but heavy. Stability becomes uncertain. Development slows. Confidence thins. Riders who once counted on Indian's direction now find themselves wondering who is steering the ship and whether the course ahead still honors the history behind the badge. For many longtime riders, this confirmed a suspicion they had carried for years. If you're following how all this unfolds, make sure you like the video, hit subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Polaris walks away. After years of strain. Riders who have followed the industry for years felt a strange sense of recognition when the news broke. Many had suspected that Polaris had been carrying a heavier load than they admitted, and seeing them walk away confirmed a tension that had lingered beneath the surface. The company had spent years rebuilding Indian from the ground up, pouring effort, engineering talent, and resources into reviving a historic badge. That kind of commitment is not abandoned casually. When a corporation leaves a brand it once championed, something deeper has shifted, and older riders understand that truth instinctively. The hidden burden becomes clearer when viewed through the long arc of the brand's modern life. Building a full motorcycle line especially one meant to compete with heavyweight American touring machines, demands constant investment. Engines evolve, frames update, testing grows more complex, and the expectations of seasoned riders rise every season. Maintaining that trajectory is costly, and not every parent company can carry that weight indefinitely. The signs were subtle but present: slower model refreshes, quieter announcements, and a sense that the push behind Indian's expansion had eased. For riders, the significance is straightforward. When a brand's foundation shakes, everything built on it feels exposed. Dealer support, parts availability, and long-term planning all rely on steady leadership. When that steadiness fades, uncertainty fills the gaps. And uncertainty is the last thing a rider wants when choosing a machine meant for stretches of highway. If any doubt remained about the depth of the problem, the market erased it in a single move. But before we go deeper, hit the description for the riding equipment that stays reliable even when the industry starts shaking. The market's reaction reveals the truth. News of the market's reaction spread quickly among riders who keep an eye on the broader industry. The shift was subtle at first, a slight change in tone from analysts and a quiet uptick in confidence among observers who had watched Indian's position weaken. What stood out was not excitement, but relief, the kind that surfaces only when a burden disappears. When a company's outlook improves the moment a brand leaves its portfolio, it signals that the brand had been holding more weight than it could justify. Riders may not follow every corporate report, but they know what it means when a parent company looks lighter the day after letting go. That reaction offers a rare moment of clarity. The market is often distant from the realities of building and riding motorcycles. Yet it reacts sharply when a brand no longer fits its expectations. The positive response suggested that the broader industry already understood what many riders had begun to feel. Indian was not contributing the strength its reputation suggested. Instead, the brand had become a question mark, and uncertainty is something investors avoid as quickly as riders do. For those who ride, this moment matters because it hints at the road ahead. A brand that no longer inspires confidence at the highest levels will face challenges on every rung beneath it, from planning to production to dealer support. The reaction was a message every rider heard clearly, and the deeper causes behind these signals form the next chapter of the story: Harley's 5-year value collapse. The past 5 years have taken a toll on Harley-Davidson in a way older riders can feel even before seeing the numbers. The brand that once stood as the dependable backbone of American motorcycling has watched its value slide by roughly 40%, and that kind of decline leaves a mark deeper than any corporate report can capture. It is a slow fade rather than a sudden drop, the kind that creeps into the corners of dealership conversations and rider gatherings across the country. When a company loses that much ground over that much time, something fundamental has shifted beneath the surface. The evidence is visible in the way people talk about Harley today. Riders who once saw the brand as unshakable now speak with a tone that blends loyalty with concern, because a slide of this scale rarely happens without deeper issues taking root. 5 years is long enough for trends to prove themselves, long enough for a pattern to emerge, and long enough for even the most dedicated Harley owners to wonder what direction the company is truly heading. A brand built on confidence now finds itself needing to rebuild that same confidence from the ground up. For riders, the meaning behind this decline reaches beyond the numbers. A fading value signals uncertainty about long-term strength. And when a company known for building machines meant to last generations shows signs of instability, owners naturally question what the future holds for their bikes, their dealerships, and the culture tied to the name. And while value may tell part of the story, the day-to-day earnings paint a different picture, one that carries its own warning. Harley's shrinking profit stream. Harley-Davidson still posts profits, a fact that reassures some riders, but the real story lies in how those profits have thinned across the years. A company can remain in the black while still moving in the wrong direction, and this is where Harley finds itself today. The gap between what the brand once earned and what it earns now has narrowed with each passing cycle. Even riders who do not follow financial updates closely can sense the shift, because shrinking gains eventually shape every corner of a company's operations, from model development to dealer support. Understanding why this matters is straightforward. When a brand's profit stream tightens, every decision becomes cautious rather than confident. New models take longer to arrive. Improvements are spaced out instead of bold. Even the smallest change must justify itself. For a company built on heritage, innovation, and the pride of American craftsmanship, caution can quietly erode momentum. And in a market where loyalty is strong but patience is not infinite, losing momentum carries long-term consequences. Within the broader motorcycle industry, this thinning reflects a larger struggle. American touring machines demand constant investment and steady vision, and Harley's shrinking returns place pressure on both. Riders feel the effects over time, noticing not only which models appear, but also which ones do not. This subtle shift in the company's rhythm is a sign that the brand is trying to protect itself. But protection can also signal vulnerability. Nowhere is that vulnerability more visible than inside the showrooms themselves. Dealership overflow, new bikes sitting too long. Walk into certain Harley-Davidson dealerships today, and a rider might feel something they have not felt since the early 2000s. Silence around too many untouched machines. Rows of brand new motorcycles from the previous model year sit under the lights. Their paint still perfect, their chrome still bright, yet their seats untouched. A few dealers even display machines 2 years old, still wearing their original price tags. Older riders remember a time when a fresh touring bike barely had time to cool before someone claimed it. That rhythm defined Harley culture for decades. And seeing that rhythm stall feels unsettling. What has changed becomes clear the longer one stands inside a modern dealership. The energy is different, quieter, heavier. Sales staff no longer rush between customers because the surge simply is not there. Machines that once moved quickly now wait for someone with the right combination of enthusiasm and financing. These bikes are not unwanted. They are simply caught in a cycle where interest has softened just enough to leave them stranded. Riders who lived through stronger years can feel the difference instantly. Culturally, this overflow means something more than a slowdown. Harley dealerships were once living rooms for American motorcycling, places where riders gathered, talked, laughed, and celebrated the next chapter of their journey. When showrooms stack up with bikes that are not finding homes, the energy shifts. The pride that once radiated through the room dims slightly, and even the most loyal riders sense the weight of that change. And while showroom silence tells one part of the story, another factor outside the dealership walls explains why interest has slowed. Payment failures hit the motorcycle market hard. Across the United States, a troubling pattern has taken shape. More people are falling behind on their primary vehicle payments. Auto loan delinquencies have climbed to levels not seen in years, and that trend directly affects motorcycle sales. Most riders do not depend on their bikes as their only transportation, which means motorcycles become one of the first expenses cut when finances tighten. When a household struggles to keep up with its daily vehicle obligations, the idea of adding a big touring machine becomes out of reach, no matter how strong the passion for riding may be. The impact shows up in behavior long before it becomes visible in numbers. When people worry about paying for the vehicle that gets them to work, they delay every other major purchase. Test rides drop. Dealership visits slow. The casual browsing that once translated into a sale becomes hesitation instead. Riders who might have planned to upgrade postpone their decisions, waiting to see if their financial footing strengthens. For motorcycles, especially large touring machines, this hesitation hits harder than it does for most industries. Few purchases blend emotion and practicality the way a motorcycle does. A rider may dream of adding a new machine to the garage, but that dream fades quickly when the family's main transportation sits one missed payment away from trouble. As more households struggle with those daily realities, the entire motorcycle market feels the pressure, and the proof appears in dealership floors across the country. The forces behind these pressures continue unfolding in the next part of the story, where the fallout becomes impossible to ignore. High interest rates push big touring bikes out of reach. Across the country, riders are running the numbers with a sense of frustration they have not felt in years. Financing a large touring motorcycle has always been a serious commitment, but today the math hits harder than ever. When interest rates were low, a rider could stretch the payment on a heavyweight machine without losing sleep. Now the same loan stretches into uncomfortable territory. What once felt manageable now feels like stepping into a deep puddle without knowing how far down it goes. The rising cost of borrowing changes every conversation around upgrading, trading in, or even considering a new machine. The burden lands squarely on the people who still love the long-haul lifestyle. Riders who have put 30,000 miles a year on the odometer know exactly what they want from a bike, but the cost of financing now forces hesitation. Even those with steady incomes feel the pressure because a large touring machine carries a price tag that reflects decades of engineering and craftsmanship. When the monthly payment climbs beyond reason, passion alone cannot justify the leap. Riders sit down with calculators, shake their heads, and return to their current machines for another season. This tension slows the market in ways that ripple across every dealership. Fewer trade-ins arrive, fewer new bikes leave the floor, fewer riders take test rides just to see what the next chapter might hold. Interest rates alone cannot freeze the industry, but they can slow its heartbeat until sales patterns feel noticeably different. What once moved with the rhythm of spring and summer now feels cautious and uneven, a sign that economic pressure is reshaping one of the strongest traditions in American riding. While financing pushes riders back, another force makes building motorcycles more difficult for every manufacturer involved. Tariffs and material costs squeeze. Every manufacturer, metal prices have always influenced motorcycle production, but today the strain feels sharper than ever. Steel and aluminum costs rose through recent years, and the machinery required to shape them grew more expensive as well. For companies that build large V-twin touring machines, those increases hit every corner of the process. Frames, tanks, wheels, and even hardware pieces become more costly before a single bike reaches a dealer's door. Builders accustomed to predictable supply chains now navigate a landscape where nothing stays steady long enough to plan far ahead. Costs rise across every layer of production. Shipping grows expensive, suppliers raise prices, and machining becomes harder to manage, forcing engineers to adjust designs and production teams to adapt. These disruptions slow schedules and add uncertainty. The result appears in the motorcycles themselves: higher prices, delayed updates, or reduced features. It is not a lack of ambition, but the reality of building complex machines under strain, a challenge seasoned riders recognize beneath the surface. But while cost pressures shape the production side, another persistent misunderstanding shapes the way people talk about the industry itself. If you want to stay ahead of every major change in the motorcycle world, go ahead and subscribe. The misleading aging rider myth. For years, commentators have repeated a claim that older riders are disappearing, suggesting that brands struggle because the core audience is shrinking. Anyone who spends real time on the road knows this myth does not match reality. Older riders have not vanished. Their presence is strong at rallies, on scenic routes, in service shops, and across every corner of the touring community. These riders continue to log serious miles and invest in machines that fit their lifestyle. The so-called decline is not a decline at all. It is a misunderstanding repeated often enough to feel true. The touring community is still strong, shaped by riders who have spent decades moving from early carbureted V-twins to modern fuel-injected machines. They maintain traditions, value comfort and reliability, and remain deeply committed. The real issue is not age, but affordability. Riders in their 50s, 60s, and 70s ride with purpose, but rising ownership costs create hesitation. Longtime riders remain the backbone of American touring, carrying its pride, history, and culture forward. Yet, even with a strong core audience, the sheer number of brands in the touring world creates a challenge no single company can escape. Too many builders, not enough touring buyers. The American touring segment is now more crowded than ever. Harley, Indian, Honda, and several overseas manufacturers all compete for the same group of riders who want large, comfortable machines built for long miles. Each brand offers its own flavor, design language, and heritage. But the total number of buyers has not grown at the same pace as the number of models. This imbalance creates a market where too many machines chase too few customers, leaving each manufacturer fighting harder for the same slice of attention. The overlap becomes obvious when every brand targets the same touring rider. Honda refines its long-distance platform, Harley broadens its lineup, Indian advances the Challenger and Pursuit, and others add competing options. Choice grows, but the rider pool does not. As each company fights for the same audience, none gain commanding momentum. Competition strengthens the culture, yet strains manufacturers, who must sustain identity and investment without stretching limited demand beyond what the market can naturally support. The American touring market reaches a breaking point. For decades, the American touring segment carried a quiet predictability. Riders moved from one stage of life to the next, upgrading machines as their needs changed. Manufacturers trusted that rhythm and built their strategies around it. For a long stretch, that pattern held strong. Big V-twin bikes rolled out of factories in steady waves, and the culture surrounding them had the feeling of a living tradition rather than a shifting trend. The past painted a picture of stability, and for many riders, it felt as if the market would hold forever. The touring market now faces pressures it has not seen in a generation. Costs climb, buyers hesitate, and the rider base stays steady instead of growing. Too many manufacturers compete for limited space, and the old balance is gone. When supply outweighs demand, correction becomes inevitable. Whether through consolidation or fewer models, something must give. Longtime riders can feel the shift coming, even without forecasts, as the industry approaches a decisive turning point. Among all the players navigating this tightening landscape, one brand faces an especially delicate future. Why Indian's future is the most fragile. Indian now moves forward without the manufacturing foundation that supported its revival, and that loss carries more weight than many casual observers realize. The manufacturing backbone provides all of that structure, and without it, the road ahead becomes uncertain. Indian must now find a way to produce the same level of quality while rebuilding the support system that once held everything together. Indian operates in a demanding segment where large touring machines require precise construction and steady refinement shaped by decades of real riding. Losing an established manufacturing base disrupts that rhythm, making continuity difficult to rebuild. The brand's identity and loyal community remain strong, but passion cannot replace infrastructure. Indian now faces a steep challenge in sustaining its lineup under a new structure, standing at a fragile crossroads in an already stretched market. Yet even as Indian faces these challenges, Harley-Davidson finds itself confronting its own vulnerable position. Why Harley isn't safe either. Harley-Davidson remains a symbol of American motorcycling, but symbols do not escape pressure. The company's business model leans heavily on large, premium touring machines bikes built for long miles, comfort, and presence. These machines define Harley's identity and supply the cultural weight that keeps riders connected to the brand. But relying so much on one segment becomes a vulnerability when that segment tightens. The company is tied to a category that depends on buyers willing to invest in machines that represent a significant financial commitment. Harley's reliance on large touring bikes creates a fragile balance. When fewer riders commit to high-priced, heavyweight models, the effect hits fast. The bikes are still respected, but the market hesitates. For riders, the concern is cultural, not financial. Any shift in Harley's lineup risks reshaping the identity built around long miles, big V-twins, and a shared sense of belonging. When that foundation wavers, the entire community feels the strain. And that community stands at the center of the final, most important part of the story. What all of this means for American riders and the culture. What happens next in the American touring world will shape more than the business landscape. It will influence the culture that riders built over generations of shared roads, weekend trips, and cross-country journeys. If even one major brand falters, the impact will reach far beyond dealership doors. Owners depend on steady parts availability, strong resale value, and a network of mechanics who understand their machines. A weakened market jeopardizes all of that, making long-term ownership more uncertain for riders who plan to keep their bikes for decades. Motorcycle gatherings and long-distance rides depend on confidence in the machines beneath riders. If consolidation dims brand presence, the unity and heritage of the community weaken. American motorcycling has always thrived on continuity stories passed down, engines rebuilt, miles shared. Now the culture stands at a crossroads, shaped by forces beyond any single manufacturer. Yet one truth holds: the riders themselves will preserve the spirit. Whatever changes come, the heart of American touring endures in every mile and every shared story. American motorcycling has been through tough moments before, but this one matters. What happens next will affect resale, parts support, and the future of long-haul riding. If you're seeing this at your local dealer, drop a comment and share it. Hit like if this rang true, and subscribe for straight talk without corporate spin.